Last week when we heard about John the Baptist, he was boldly preaching at the Jordan River. And this week, he's in jail. Remember, he's been arrested for speaking out against Herod's marriage. And he's been spending some time in prison, and now he sends a message from President to Jesus and asks, hey, are you the one who's supposed to come, or should we look for another? Isn't that a weird juxtaposition of moments? You think about John the Baptist's story in general. I mean, John the Baptist, we know, 6 months older than Jesus. His mother Elizabeth carrying him in her womb. Mary carrying Jesus in her womb. When Elizabeth and Mary meet, what does John the Baptist do in the womb? He leaps for joy that Jesus is there. And then he has this ministry at the Jordan River where he's preaching boldly. He's talking about the Messiah, the one who is to come, whose sandals he's not even allowed to strap. He points at Jesus in the Gospel of John and says, behold the Lamb of God. And his own disciples abandon him to go follow Jesus. And now he's been locked up, and he seems to be having his doubts. I don't know. He's been locked up in the Gospel of Matthew at this point for like 6 or 7 chapters. I don't know. Is that weeks, months, years? I don't know. But in the suffering of his prison cell, John seems to be having doubts, at least serious questions. So much so that he sends somebody to go ask Jesus, are you really the Messiah? Are you the one that we've waited for? I find this actually helpful for myself, encouraging for me. We all find ourselves at times in places that feel dark, suffering in our own ways, personally, in our families. Maybe we look at the state of the world and we're just incredibly discouraged. And we might find ourselves wondering, Lord, are you going to do anything about this? Just like John the Baptist felt like. Maybe he felt like that personally for himself. He was maybe surprised that he's still in prison. If Jesus is the Messiah, why is Jesus letting this happen? And also, why is Jesus not doing something about this corrupt political system that they're dealing with Herod? And so we should see a little bit of ourselves in John, I think, and recognize that it's okay if we're struggling with those questions about God's presence when things are tough. To John's credit, he doesn't just wallow in his despair. He goes and he reaches out to Jesus. He finds a way from his jail cell, sends somebody to go ask Jesus the question, are you the one? That's what we got to do when we're struggling. We have to reach out to the Lord and ask the question maybe, but keep that line of communication open. Too often, we get discouraged, and we think that we totally understand. Well, God just doesn't love me. God just doesn't care. God just doesn't exist. Whatever. We've solved it somehow in our head, and we break off the line of communication. John kept the line of communication open. Now, it's not like Jesus gave him the easiest answer. Jesus didn't send back a message of like, hey, just give it 2 more weeks, man. I'll get you out of jail. Jesus probably wouldn't say man, sorry. Instead, Jesus sends back a message of saying, well, talk about the things that have happened. The blind regain their sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, the poor have the good news proclaimed to them. Now, John would have understood that Jesus is referencing a lot of the prophetic literature from the Old Testament, specifically Isaiah. There's this promise that when God comes in his power, he's going to start doing these things. Now, I presume that when people were reading the Old Testament, those passages, they didn't usually think that God was talking about opening the literal eyes of the blind. It was more about opening spiritual eyes of our spiritual blindness and opening our ears from our spiritual deafness. But now Jesus is doing it in a physical way to show that he can do it in a deeper spiritual way, that he is the promised Messiah. So he sends back the message that John wants to hear, that needs to hear. But John will ultimately be killed. His situation doesn't get better before he dies. He spends the rest of his days hoping for this future, hoping for all the good things the Messiah is going to do, but he doesn't get to see it come to fruition. Now he gets to experience it now, right? Post-resurrection, like John the Baptist is with the Lord. He never lost his faith. He had to fight for that faith, yes, but he never lost it, and he gets to experience glory with the Lord now. But he had to hold on in the midst of difficult circumstances. It didn't actually get better, didn't get easier for John the Baptist. And it might be the same way for us. We need to keep that line of communication open with the Lord. And we need to be ready that the Lord's going to say, well, pay attention to the other things that I'm doing. Maybe Jesus didn't get John out of jail, but Jesus was doing amazing things for other people, and that had to be enough for John to prove that Jesus was all-powerful. And sometimes it has to be enough for us. When it feels like life's really hard, we have to pay attention to the blessings that God is doing in the world for other people. That's hard. But it is a sign that God is still good and God still loves us when I see how God is blessing other people. And we should be able to go back in our own memory and remember all the ways in which God has blessed us personally. I may not be feeling it now, and I may not be feeling particularly grateful right now for all the things that God did for me years ago. But holding on to those things can really keep us grounded in the truth that the Lord is good and the Lord loves me. I was thinking about when we come to the Eucharist, we are encountering Jesus who lives today, right? This is the Jesus resurrected, so there's a sign of hope here. There's also this is the sacrifice on the cross. This is Jesus crucified. And the two are, like, you can't separate Jesus crucified from Jesus resurrected. They're both fully present here in this moment. And the Lord's going to give us what we need. If we're in the midst of our own cross, Jesus on the cross is with us right here. And if we need a reminder of hope, if we need God's help in looking forward to a future of hope, the God of the resurrection is also right here. We're receiving the same Jesus in our hearts in this Eucharist today. And so when we find ourselves in that place of doubt, like John the Baptist did, we lean into the Eucharist and we trust that Jesus is with us in our crucifixion so that we will be with him in his resurrection.